I hope everyone is having a wonderful Wednesday. Hey, it is Wednesday, and one of the things we know about Wednesday is that we are halfway to the weekend. So give yourselves a round of applause because we are halfway there. So as you see from the slide, my name is Trina Spencer, and I'm from Virginia State University. And joining me today will be Tracy Walker and Joel Uri, and they're going to they will formally introduce themselves to you. So it is our privilege and our pleasure to be here today. So I'm just going to give you a few facts, if you will, about Virginia State University for those of you who do not know. We are actually an HBCU, a historically Black college and university, and we're actually located in Chesterfield County, Virginia, which is about 30 minutes south of Richmond. We are considered a land grant college, Virginia Tech being the other land grant university in the state of Virginia. Just to also let you know that we are the first name of our university was actually Virginia Normal and Industrial Institute. So our university started off as a college for the preparation of teachers, if you will. So now just a little bit about us. One of the things I have a mystery for you. You're going to have to figure out what does Tracy, Tracy, I, and Joelle, what do we all have in common? So, but you may move on to the next slide. So this is our agenda that we have that we prepared for you for today. We have our welcome and we have our introduction. We're going to have a warm-up activity, which we're in the part of right now. We're going to present to you today, but at least for the first half, we're going to present an overview of assessment, and we're going to have Tracy Walker. She's going to be introducing, talk about evaluating impact on student learning, and then throughout our activity or our time with you this morning, we'll have some interaction, not only with us, but also some interaction with the coaches and the other teachers who are actually a part of what we're doing. So those are some of the things that we have planned in store for this morning activity. So Tracy, you may slide on to the next slide. Okay, so I thought we would start off by first introducing ourselves. So, and as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So my formal title, if you will, is Chair Associate Professor on the College of Education, Department of Teaching and Learning. But when people ask me, hey, what do you do for a living? I say I teach. I teach older students, I teach college students, but I am a former elementary school teacher, and I am from Hampton, Virginia, but I taught for 15 years for Newport News Public School. But currently, I'm in Virginia State. I'm going to my 14th year, so that's why you have the apple that's there. So the other thing that you see is that you'll see two pictures of my nephews, and I actually have more nephews and nieces than that, but those are nephews that live in Texas. We just sent one off to Oregon State this weekend, and the other nephews at the University of Chicago. So I do enjoy and I value family. The other picture you see, if there's a journal, I do like journaling and writing. It kind of clears my mind, it kind of clears my thoughts, it kind of is a stress reliever for me. The other way I'm kind of introducing myself is to show my love of plants. Yes, I have plants throughout the house, and that's been my indoor gardening, if you will, and it's kind of kept me sane through this period that we've had in the last year. And another way I like introducing myself is that I do consider myself to be a STEAM educator. I've started being involved in STEAM, was a lead science teacher from elementary school, and I've been involved in STEAM education for a very long time. And Tracy Walker and I have actually worked on some grants together for various summer projects that involve around the STEAM concept, not only from a STEAM standpoint of making sure the students enjoy STEAM, but also making sure that public school teachers or pre-service teachers the teachers in our program have and love and enjoyment of teaching in those areas as well. So that is just a little bit about me. And so now we're going to move on to the next slide. And I believe the next slide is talking about Dr. Walker.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. I'm working with a new mouse today, so it's slower than I'm used to, so sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Walker. I currently work at a school in Richmond, Virginia called Code RVA Regional High School. We are a regional magnet school for computer science. We are a public school that works more like a program similar to how Governor's School recruits students from surrounding districts. So we have 15 partnering school divisions. So students come to us for all 4 grade levels for their high school experience. And what I do here is I am considered the Magnet Schools Assistance Program Project Director. What that basically means is when the school started up in 2017, it also received a $6 million federal grant. And I came on board not only in the excitement to start a school from the ground up, like re-envision the school processes, but also I came on board to manage the grant. And that's my role here at Code RVA. So you'll see a couple of things that I love. I have 2 children that are 22 and 19, and they were insistent that I could not include their pictures here. So that I have 2 adult kids, but these are my babies here. The little brownish dog is Chewy, and his sister, Princess Leia Skywalker, is the little white one. So those are my babies. You'll see some other things I love to do when I have spare time is I love to read. I do a lot of, I guess, more science fiction kind of reading. So that's what I like. In the top there, you'll see one of my other passions is softball. And I actually play in a 50 and over travel softball team, women's team. And so that's me and a few of my teammates in Florida when we got to go to the Tournament of Champions that we won the national title for our age bracket. And we got rings like like the Super Bowl rings. We got big rings like that. So I'm passionate about softball. And then my newest baby is down in the corner, my little baby Bronco Sport that I just got. His name is Boba, like Boba Fett from Star Wars. So I got a theme going there. But that's a little bit about me. As Dr. Spencer mentioned, we have worked together for some time on different grant and research projects related to STEM and STEAM. My K-12 experience, I wasn't a classroom teacher in K-12, but I was a school counselor. So those of you that are familiar with the JMU area, my first counseling job was at Broadway High School. Most people haven't heard, unless you're from that area, you haven't heard of Broadway High School, but that's where I started out. I am originally from Richmond, and I have served as a school counselor, school counseling director. I've worked in central office as an assessment specialist, and now here I am at Code RVA. So that's a little bit about me. So I hope we get a chance to talk a little bit about we're going to talk more about assessment, which is something I'm excited to talk about as well.
Hey, so good morning, everyone. I am Joelle Yor, and I work for Henrico County Public Schools. More specifically, I work at Moody Middle School, and my long title of what my job is Coordinator of Assessment and Remediation. Short title, you can just say I'm the testing coordinator and data analyst for our building, but within Henrico County, we're known as CARS. So, which is why I have next to our school logo, I have a car located there. And it's kind of a running joke amongst the other cars in the county, like what kind of car would you be? So the kind of car that I would be a Toyota, because they are long lasting and they go forever and ever. You can get up to like 200,000 plus miles on it. So that's kind of how I am. I'm reliable and I go for it. I have 2 children, Cameron and Chloe. They are 4 years apart. Cameron just turned 6 not too long ago, and my daughter will be 2 next month in July. And they definitely keep me going all the time. And my son is a baseball player, so I'm always on the field, spring and fall. And I'm that baseball mom, always screaming and yelling. So I just pray for him as we move forward. I am very, very, very goal oriented. I achieve when I feel complete, like when I complete or check things off my list. So for me, I write down what I want to get accomplished, and I write it down in steps, and I check it off, and it makes me feel good. It also makes me see like how far I've came and what else I need to get done. So that's why I put my Bitmoji with the hashtag goals, because that's definitely how I live my life. And I am looking for a vacation. I am missing the days where we can go to the beach or see something new or whatever it might be. I am also from Hampton, Virginia. I left Hampton and attended Virginia State University. I graduated there in 2010. And then that's when I moved to Henrico County. So I've been in the Richmond area ever since. So I love the beach, being from that area, and I miss it. But I'm also like now wanting to explore and see different things. My next trip, or the trip that I want to take next, is I want to go to Seattle or somewhere on the West Coast. Because the furthest west I have been is Nevada. Okay, so that is all about me.
Thank you, thank you. So in the go back 1 second, please, to Dr. Walker. So in the chat, what do all three of us have in common? That's your first tough question for today. What do all three? So based on what you've heard, what do all three of us have in common? Just put what you think in the chat. Educators, love education. Educators, I did hear children. I like that. Virginia Roots educators, assessment, family, good, wonderful, wonderful. Because you can learn a lot from, in terms of assessing of people and our students by how they talk and how they interact. So you are correct in everything that you said. Technically, I don't have children. I almost say technically I have over 100 children, because all of the students I've had ever since I've been teaching, I've adopted, and some I literally talk to just about every day. One of the things that we all have in common is that we're all connected to Virginia State University. So Joelle was actually one of my first students when I got to Virginia State University, and she's still talking to me. So I must not have done that bad of a job. And Dr. Walker, Tracy Walker, serves right now as an adjunct professor at Virginia State University. I've known Tracy through our relationship with Virginia State for a while. And just to let you know, go ahead,
Dr. Spencer, I forgot to say, my background is, before I became a CAR, I was an exceptional education teacher. So I've always had the piece of the data and analyzing data. But we'll get to that in a few minutes.
So that is our connection, is Virginia State University and the love of education and all the content that you said. So before we move on to the next slide, I kind of want to set the stage, if you will, for what our presenters are going to go into. One of the things that all of us are here, all of us are educators. All of us are here because we're teaching in the public schools now. Some of us may be retired and so on and so forth. So as we go into the presentation, I want to kind of lay the format of what we're actually going to do. So I have, as we go through, if you will, I have some questions that I'm going to ask you. And I just want you to kind of jot the answers down in your head, or just think about them, if you will. So the first question that I have for you is, what is teaching? So we are educators and we are teachers. So what does it mean to be a teacher? So just kind of quickly jot down in your head, what does it mean to be a teacher? Or what is meant by teaching? All right, I would like one person to unmute themselves and to tell me, what is your definition? Oh, thank you, Ms. Good. Sharing and inspiring others to become more autonomous in their efforts, outstanding. If I also would like somebody to unmute themselves and to say, what do they consider, what is teaching?
Creating a passion for learning.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one other person. I said one person, but I now want two people.
Facilitator of education and knowledge.
Outstanding. Also, I see in the chat a person who guides students towards lifelong learning. Dr. Walker, go ahead and slide to the, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. So in addition to what you have, I always like starting off talking about what is teaching because part of the presentation that you're going to have today are information that I share with my undergraduate students. I do teach a course in the topics that we're talking about today. So in terms of teaching, I always like to start off when I'm talking to teachers. It's intentionally creating activities that lead to changes in knowledge, skills, and or dispositions of another person. So one thing about it is that we're very intentional, and that and our attention or our intentionality comes through the planning that we do. It comes through thinking about lessons. It can come through when you come together and you're working with other teachers on a grade level, or even when you're coming to different virtual conferences like this. So I always like talking about teaching and what we do as a teacher. And of course, dispositions, I'm not sure if we talk about this enough in terms of it, especially this past year, we're making sure that we're impacting our students, not only from a knowledge and skills standpoint, but making sure that we're caring for them as much as possible on an emotional level, making sure the mental health is taken care of, and a variety of other things. So go to the next slide, Dr. Walker. Okay, so one of the things that as teachers, we want to make sure that we have that we're learning. So if we're talking about teaching, usually if I had longer time, I kind of like pulling out from students. If you teach, you want students to learn. So what is learning? So learning is a permanent change in knowledge, skills, or dispositions precipitated by planned or unplanned experiences, activities, events, activities, or other interventions. So one of the things I like stressing is that just because you're talking in front of students doesn't mean they've learned anything. I mean, I think we all know that. I think we've all been to enough conferences that, you know, we heard someone talking, but 2 hours later, or maybe 2 minutes later, we totally forgot what they said. So when we're talking about learning, we're making sure that it's something that is permanent. And in terms of making sure that things are permanent, we have. And also, I think we as a teacher, that we have some unplanned things. For example, a fire alarm will go off, or something unplanned happens in the classroom. A child pushes another child, or something happens in the neighborhood. These are the type of experiences that we can use to we can use for teaching and as a vehicle for helping for students to learn. So now finally to my next point, if you will, and I don't want Dr. Don't go to the next slide yet. How do you know if students are learning? Okay, so we've talked about teaching, and we've kind of talked about learning. So someone put in someone kind of put in chat, and you've already started doing that. How do you know if students are learning? So I see some responses. They're able to teach each other, assessment, formal and wonderful. They demonstrate the skill, feedback, and assessments. Good. So now, Dr. Walker, now you may be providing an opportunity to show whether they're good. So that leads me to the concept that we have right here. How do you know if students are learning? And you know through the process of what we call assessments. Because we can talk all day to students, but until we actually let them see, until we actually are interacting with them, they're talking to each other, they're doing all these variety of things, that's how we know. So assessment is a process of using methods and tools to collect information about student learning. So our hope is at the end of this presentation, between this morning and this afternoon, you're going to learn some more tools in your bag, in your teacher bag, if you will, to kind of help you know or help you understand more of the concept about assessment. Okay, and if we could spend all day and all, there are definitely courses on it on assessment. So you may go on a slide onto the next slide. So in the interest of time, we're actually going to that was an activity I was going to have us do. What comes to mind when you hear the word assessment? And some of you have already put words in the chat in terms of what comes to mind. So we're going to we are going to go ahead and move on and skip that activity and move forward.
Okay, Dr. Spencer, I'm just going to share the link in the chat if someone wants to look at it later.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So we're going to start. Thank you, Tracy. So I'm going to kind of broadly talk about assessment and for student learning. This is something I'm sure that you've actually seen before. So in terms of assessment of and for learning, the teacher systematic gathers, analyzes, and uses relevant data to measure student progress. As a part of assessment of learning, we have evaluating students in terms of assessment of learning. We know that to be summative assessment, and that's going to be talked a little bit later in the presentation, but that's evaluating students' knowledge at the end of the grading period or unit. And then we have assessment for learning, which is assessing knowledge or skills during the learning and teaching process. And we know that as formative assessment. Okay, you may move on to the next slide. So what you have in front of you are some of the sample performance indicators that are under this umbrella of assessment for and as learning. So it may be hard for you to see, but these are some of the things that as teachers that we are developing. And trust me, having been in education close to 30 years, this is a never-ending process. When I first started in education, a lot of the things that I'm doing now was really very hardly, if at all, talked about. So this is a process that does take time for people to learn and take hold of. So in terms of the indicators of what we're seeing, use of pre-assessment, using a variety of formal and informal assessments. Also, in terms of what we're seeing in terms of how we are assessing students, we're also making sure that we have correct questioning skills and questioning techniques that effectively engage students in the learning. We've talked about formative and summative assessments, and that will actually be talked about a little bit later. But also under this umbrella, if you will, we know that we have to collect and maintain records. And thankfully, with this age of technology, you have all sorts of technology tools to kind of help you to collect and maintain records. And also in terms of the indicators of what we see a teacher doing is making sure they have constructive and frequent feedback on student learning. So I just want to provide an overview of what we're going to be talking about. And now I'm going to switch. I think the next slide is actually moves to Tracy. Yes.
Thank you. So when Dr. Spencer asked me to talk about assessment, she knows that comes with about 100 plus questions from me. And what about this? And what about this? So with the group being large, I didn't want to assume that people already had specific understandings about assessment. So as we go through, some of these are more points to consider in your classroom assessments that you may do. And just know that going into a school, if some of you are already in a school setting, you know that an individual school may have a way they want assessments completed. A different school division may set forth those expectations, but what we want to do is give you some a more understanding of why are we doing this? what are some things to consider when we do this? And then what does it mean to have, to utilize assessment in our professional capacities? So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. Feel free to pop in with any questions in the chat, or use the raise hand if there's something you want me to talk further about. So let's talk about some of these. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how does assessment fit in? So I pulled this graphic, and I know the graphic is supposed to be a stool with 3 legs, but someone earlier was talking about the beach. And so now I'm thinking it looks like a jellyfish. So I've changed my thinking on that already. So really, student learning in the classroom, this illustration shows us how it's kind of a 3-tiered approach, or a 3-legged approach. So the first thing that we always start with is the curriculum, and that's what we teach. So if you're in Virginia, we've got the SOL, so you already know there's specific expectations about what the content should be for that year or for that content area that you're teaching. So we start with that. What are we expected to teach? Then we move to the second leg of instruction, and then we may be needing to figure out, how are we going to teach this, right? So I might get a concept that I haven't taught before, and then I have to figure out some strategic ways to engage students, or just figure out what am I going to do with this? But then the third leg of that is assessment. So now, how do I make sure the students are learning what they should be learning, or that they're taking that knowledge on with them to the next grade level, or even the next activity that you're doing in that class? So I just want you to kind of think about that in the bigger picture. Is there's 3 different areas to think about for engaging your students for learning. Okay. So why do we use assessments in the classroom, and then how do we use them? So as you know, as a teacher going into a classroom, why do we use them? Sometimes your answer might be because the administrators told me to. This is what we're going to do. But there is, in your classroom, you may have some flexibility in how you collect assessment data, or how you ensure your students are learning those concepts, and perhaps even developing a passion for the content based on the way that you've presented the material. So we use assessment because it's a way for you as a teacher to really see and gauge how your students are learning. So it's not just, are they learning, but how are they learning? Because we all know students learn in different ways. And so that's our role as the instructor in the classroom, is to make sure everyone is able to learn that concept. We know that data is collected informally and formally. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But I also wanted to just engage you with 4 general categories of assessment. So as Dr. Spencer mentioned, she teaches a class on assessment. I also teach assessment for of people in educational leadership, people in school counseling, and in sometimes assisting Dr. Spencer with her courses for teachers. I could talk about assessment all day for a whole semester, but I only have a small amount of time. So if anything pops up in your mind, again, just like you're doing, please put that in the chat. Okay, so we've all probably heard the term informal assessments and formal assessments. So for the purpose of what we're going to talk about today, I just wanted to clarify a few points about what the difference is between the two. So I'm going to start on the right-hand side with the formal assessment. So when we have a formal assessment, we're typically comparing maybe our classroom group or individuals within our classroom to some kind of norm. So what that might mean is our school division has decided that if we are giving a formal assessment that's a division assessment, meaning all students in my grade level are going to take this at the end of the year, then we're comparing our students against other students to see how we performed. Typically a formal assessment because of what the responses are used for, or the results are used for. They're mainly going to be short answer or multiple choice type questions as part of that. So it means that it's going to be more standardized, in that everyone will be administered the assessment in the same way, the same directions will be read, and similar to that, as you all know, at the end of the year, we take an SOL test in some grade levels and content areas, and that is an example of a more formal assessment as well. And then if we looked at the left-hand side there, our informal assessment are things really that teachers do pretty consistently throughout the day in their classroom. It's things that are more naturally occurring. And one example of that is asking students to raise their hand and respond to you. It may be activity-based. Do you all do Kahoot? Do you use Kahoot in your classroom? At my high school, the kids love Kahoot. So it might be something like that, a more informal assessment to see what they know and what they don't know, so that you as the instructor can perform reviews as needed. Teacher observations. As a teacher, just simply sometimes walking around the classroom to see how students are working or engaged in the activity can informally tell you who's on track, who's understanding the activity or the content. And it's usually that type of non-standardized measure. So what I want to do is just pause for a moment and answer this question here. Can you think of a few examples for each of these? But really, I think what I'd love to hear is some examples about informal assessments, or what you may have used in your classroom that would be considered more of an informal assessment to see where your students are. Okay, I see a lot of familiar things. Oh, thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah. Booklet, IXL. My school's going to use IXL next year. Kahoot and quizzes. Google Forms. Google Forms is great. Oh, that's what I was going to say. The exit ticket. So the exit, you guys, these are great ideas. I love all of these. So I think sometimes the students, when you can engage them in more informal style assessments, they don't realize they're learning. It's almost like tricking them into learning something, right? Or Nearpod. Is that Christine put Nearpod, I think. So yeah, those are great examples. And even as Dr. Spencer said, she teaches adults, but they're her students. I also teach adults as an adjunct, and they're my students. And I sometimes, even with the adults, I'll say, just give me a thumbs up that, are you awake? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Thank you. Okay. So let's just touch on what a pre-assessment is. And so I'm sure this is something that you're probably already doing. So we kind of got to get that baseline of what students already know, or sometimes we may be asking students, what do they want to learn? So at Code RVA, we are trying to incorporate something called agile methodologies into how our students learn during the school day, because in our setting, we're training students to go on potentially to work in an IT office environment. So we use agile in that we try to help students become more self-reliant on identifying what it is they want to know about a subject. So we may have activities where students will let the instructor know. Here, the instructor will say, here's the topic, here's the plan for what we're going to cover. Just based on this, what are your questions? What would you like to know? So we use that as a pre-assessment here. You also will also use pre-assessment for planning, and really to help differentiate how you're going to approach the topic that you're teaching. Because again, we know there's different students in our classroom learn in different ways. And we really need to be able to have that differentiated approach for pre-assessment as well. You've probably heard pre-assessments called pre-tests. This is a good way also for you to demonstrate that students are making small gains in a short amount of time by giving them a pre and a post test. And so that's one way that we would use pre-assessments. And it's really a way to get students involved or engaged in their own learning. And so again, at my school, now we're a high school, we use these methods to help engage our students and plan their own learning process. Okay. So formative assessments, we're going to talk formative and summative, and I just have a little bit of information here about what it is and what it can do for you. So why do we use it? So formative assessments are a process. So we are in the process of delivering content, delivering instruction, and we need to gauge as we go if students are keeping up with the pace, or if we need to stop and reframe the instructional technique and represent that information to students. It's a way that the instructor can monitor learning that I mentioned. It's definitely planned. One thing with a formative assessment is that type of technique actually allows you to use a very wide range of question types. So what happens if you were just to give your students a multiple choice test every time you were to assess them? Just drop a note in the chat. What happens, or what would you think would happen if you only gave multiple choice tests? Right, so far, they're bored, less accurate, definitely lack of creativity. Right. Yep. Oh, exactly. Not all students are good at test taking, and it doesn't allow for those high level thinking skills to emerge. So when you're considering development of a formative assessment, you definitely want to use that wide range of question types. Some students are better at answering open-ended questions. Some are better at multiple choice. Some are better at presenting or orally demonstrating their understanding. It also gives students, it allows students a way to have
I
specific
saw that last night.
so it gives students a way to have specific feedback as they're going along instead of at the end, right? Because as a teacher, you're not giving a student a grade just to give them a grade, right? Although some feel like you're just giving me this so you can give me a grade, and the parents, they just want to see that grade at the end of the marking period, right? But you have to be able to give the students feedback so that they understand where they are and where they're missing something. And I know someone did mention in the comments about showing their thinking process, and especially in teaching math, you want to see and need to see where students are getting lost in the process, right? All right, so then summative assessment. I think when people are thinking summative assessment, they're thinking it's something that just happens at the end of the year in schools, but it's not necessarily that. It is, a summative assessment is one that occurs at the end of an activity. So a summative assessment can be the end of the marking period. It can be the end of a unit. It could be the semester exam. It could be the end of year test. So think of it a little bit more of that. It's the end of the activity, and now you're saying, did you learn all of this content? Can you demonstrate that you learned it? It typically uses a limited answer response when we're using it in the form of, for example, an SOL test, right? That is a summative assessment. It's gauging what our students supposedly learned that year, but it's only doing it in a multiple choice format. And so we know, not just multiple choice any longer. We've got click and drag, right? We've got drag and drops. But still some students may have better opportunities to present that information in a better way. And that's why, just to get off of that page for just a second, I'm really excited about the opportunities that students are starting to have with performance-based assessments, instead of sitting down and taking a multiple choice SOL test. So I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that, but that's a topic for another day. So performance-based assessments are giving students an opportunity to demonstrate their knowledge in a different way. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, I think someone just asked the question, formative assessment is more informal and summative is formal. You can think of it that way, but formative assessment is, it can be more, yes, let's just say yes. That's the easiest answer. Yes. Okay. All right, so then when we're—
Oh yeah, before you, Dr. Walker, before you move
Yeah.
on, someone else also asked about benchmarks and being a summative assessment.
Oh, yes.
Yes, are benchmarks considered summative since they take place at different points in the year?
They can be considered a summative because it is measuring what that student, the knowledge that student has gained at a specific point in the school year.
And this also can be used to compare to other pupils
Correct.
in different schools or across your school division, XYZ.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We're getting into Joelle's bread and butter there, right? Yes. Okay. So then we might be thinking, what makes a good assessment? So I don't want to get too much into the technical aspects of reliability and validity, because that's a whole different research class you may or may not have taken as part of your program. I just wanted to give you this graphic to kind of get a look at understanding why it's important for us to try to make sure our assessments that we develop in the classroom are reliable and valid. So we're going to look at the graphic, then I'm going to get further into examples of what it means to have a valid assessment and a reliable assessment. Okay. So if we look at this graphic, in that first top left corner with the red circle around it, we see on this bullseye that we've got marks all over the target. So that is an example of an assessment that's not really reliable and it's not really valid because it's not hitting the mark. It's not helping us ensure or measure what our students are knowing. So it might have questions that either students aren't understanding and so they're responding in ways that we didn't expect, or it can just mean that for whatever reason for that content we were teaching, the students just didn't really seem to get it. And that happens sometimes. So if we look at the top right where it says reliable and we've got an orange circle, we see we didn't really hit the target, but our responses are all very similar. Okay, so it's okay to have, we want our assessments to be reliable. In that picture, we can see that our students are all responding very similarly. Okay, so that means that we hit a mark, just not the mark we were going for. Okay. All right, and I promise this is going to make sense in just a minute. Okay. All right, so then on the bottom left in the green, if we're valid, we see we've got a number of hits on our target, which means our students are responding in a way that we would expect, and then they're hitting that target, meaning they're also responding to the specific content. And then if we make sure our assessment is both reliable and valid, I have that bottom right corner. So everything is collected right around the target. So what does that mean? Let's take a look. If we have an assessment that's considered reliable, that means that it is consistently measuring a characteristic or the knowledge that we want that student to have or our class to have. It also shows us that the score is trustworthy, meaning that we built items in our assessment or the rubric that we use. If we repeated it later, students should score similarly. Okay. If our assessment is valid, it means overall that assessment we used did measure what it was supposed to measure. Okay. And that means if we have an item, so if I have a essay question about a specific content area and I score that question on my rubric, and I gave the student a different question, but on the same topic, they should score about similarly. And that would be a valid. So again, this is all I'm going to talk about with reliability and validity, because we could talk about it all day, but I just wanted to bring that up. We just want to make sure that when we develop our own classroom assessments, that really we're doing a good job of measuring what we intended to measure. And that's usually the content, right? Okay. All right, so what I wanted to do here was just bring in another graphic. I got this graphic from a textbook I'm not sure if you all are familiar with. It's called Teacher Made Assessments, and it's by Gary's and Grant. And I know this is a book that Dr. Spencer and I both like to use when we're teaching the assessment class, because I think it gives a good way of demonstrating for the reader how to use the higher level thinking skills and incorporate that into your assessment. So you'll see here the level of cognitive demand. So do we want our students is the purpose of this assessment for students to just remember, to understand, to apply, analyze, evaluate, create? So just know, when you create an assessment, it's typically not going to fill each of these boxes, and that's okay. You may be starting with something more simpler. So let's look at this for just a moment. If we are developing what's called select responses, meaning a student is going to complete a multiple choice test, they're going to complete matching or alternate choice. We may consider that they're applying these levels of cognitive demand. So we might consider that. And also how long you think it may take a student to respond to each item. So if you're in elementary school, you're probably not going to give a quiz or some type of assessment that has 100 questions on it, right? For an elementary age student. So typically we look at the students' cognitive abilities as well. So an elementary versus a middle school versus a high school, these items are going to look a little bit different. Then if we're looking at constructed response, which is fill in the blank, a computation style question, a short answer, or an essay, we can see by building these types of items, we can hit more of those, all of those levels of cognitive demand. And this is just a visual to help you understand, sometimes it is most appropriate for a matching or multiple choice. It is. Sometimes it's more appropriate for a short answer or an essay. I will tell you that even in the doctoral classes that I would teach, when I would have students assign a reading on the APA style manual, does that sound familiar to anyone? I would actually give them at the beginning of the next class, we would always have a 5-question multiple choice, because my purpose wasn't always to make sure you definitely picked up the content. My purpose was, please read this chapter because it's really important. So the purpose and the style of the responses that you select are going to depend on your classroom, your content, your learners. One thing I do want to point out as well, that we won't have much time to touch on today as part of this presentation. But the second item to the right, we always do want to ask ourselves as well, are our assessments culturally responsive? So are the assessments that we develop, are they meeting the needs of our students? Are they allowing all students in our classroom to be able to demonstrate their knowledge? And so I just want to make sure I touch on that is an important component of building a good assessment. It's just for the purpose of this presentation, I won't be able to touch on it for too much. Yeah, I see everybody making notes about using APA and APA there. So I love APA. If you have questions, let me know. If that by heart. Okay, so then why is the big question? Why are we doing this? Why should teachers connect assessment to student learning? So here's a few tips if you weren't already aware of how we can use assessments to help us better understand our students' learnings. So of course, we're going to gather that information. How are our students doing? Where are they right now compared to where I want them to go next as the instructor? It can help me make short-term and long-term decisions about how I'm going to approach the content, or whether I need to reteach a content, or whether my students are ready for something more challenging. It can help me produce that grade that we know our parents want to see. How are my children, how are my students doing? Here's their grade, but what does that grade really mean? This is a way to connect assessment to demonstrate what that student is showing that they can do. And it's a way to give students feedback so that they can inform their own learning. So growth mindset for students is something that we really work on in my school as well. I mentioned that we're really trying to get our students to be self-motivated, to plan some of their learning. And this is a way for them to be involved and have a way to say, I didn't do so well on this. What could I have done differently? And really help them increase that growth mindset. So that's a great strategy for connecting that together. And then why should we give feedback in the classroom? Oh, yay, go RVA. Why should we give feedback in the classroom? And you all, I don't think any of these tips are going to be surprising to you at all. It really helps to confirm that our kids are doing what we want them to be doing, or it shows that they are where we need them to be. Because as you all know, as classroom teachers, we typically are following a pacing guide, which may be laid out by each marking period as well as for the whole year. And in some cases, you have to keep going with your content. And so then we have to be able to rapidly understand where students are and where they need help. It also helps us meet those goals of following that pacing guide, right? Okay. All right, so we're getting down to the end of this here. So one thing I want to touch on is, I know when we talk about the word, we say data, and we talk about data, and that sometimes can be a scary word. But being an effective creator of assessments and a communicator about assessments, using your data in the classroom can help you advocate for not only your classroom, your students, your school, but within your division and the profession, can help you advocate for opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. And I really feel like that it was teachers that helped us move towards this performance-based assessment, to have another model for students to demonstrate what they have learned. being an intelligent consumer of assessment. So being able to develop maybe even a graphic to show where your students were at the beginning and where they are now can be something that you can then take to your administrator and say, look, the students are doing great in my classroom, and this is what I did to adjust the learning experience that they were having to help them make sure they captured that content. And also, assessment provides a way to collaborate with other teachers. So I'm so happy that you all are here today, and we have so many different perspectives on how we can and do use assessments in the classroom. And so one of the things we're going to do is an activity where it's going to give you an opportunity to share and hear what others are doing in developing or using assessments in the classroom. I think one thing we don't always get a chance to do as educators is have time. Number one, just have time, but have time to really collaborate with each other. Like, let's just sit down and say, I'm teaching this unit on whatever. How did you teach it? This is how I taught it. It didn't seem to go well. So just having the time to be able to do that is something that I think can be beneficial. So what we're going to do, I'm not sure, I'll ask Bailey, do we take a break here or do we keep going?
You can keep going. We won't have a break until noon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I want to do is we're going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to have, I think Bailey is going to put everyone into breakout groups, and looks like we've got 78 people. So Bailey, maybe 10 breakout groups?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
So let me get that set up.
Okay, and then I'll tell everyone what we're going to be doing. So in this Think, Pair, Share activity, what I want you to do is discuss each of these topics and have your group kind of come together, and you're going to put a post. I'm going to use something called Jamboard. Has anyone used Jamboard before in your classroom? Yeah, we use a lot of different tools. It's just a virtual whiteboard, and there are different ones out there, but just to keep it simple today, I wanted to use Jamboard. So we're going to be touching on each of these topics. So I want you in your group to talk about which types of assessments have you created, either informal or formal. Do you use a pre-assessment? Why or why not? So there's not a right or wrong answer to any of these. So I want you to be aware of that. It's just an opportunity to share with each other and maybe share some ideas. How do you or how can you use formative assessments to inform your instructional practices? And these are going to be, when you get to the Jamboard, which I'll put a link in here in just a moment. These questions will all be at the top of each of the pages in Jamboard. How can you incorporate students into the assessment process? Or no, do you? And if you do, how do you? And what seems to be the most successful type of assessment and least successful in your classroom that you found so far? And then what else do you want to know that maybe we haven't touched on yet? So what I want to do is take about, I have a 30-minute timer here. I don't think once you go into the breakout, you probably won't see the timer, but we're going to take about 30 minutes to touch on each of these. Let me give you the Jamboard link. I'm going to put that in the chat. Okay, so here's my Jamboard. And I think everyone will see it on my screen as well. So when it comes up, what I want to just show you, if you have not used Jamboard before, I asked the questions at the top, and I used a road, right? Because we're on the road with a destination in mind, and that's a student who successfully obtains the knowledge we have to share with them and moves on to the next grade level, right? So we're on this road together. So your group is going to add one sticky note to each of the Jamboards. And so all you're going to do is come to the left side and you'll click and you can pick your color and you'll type your response on the sticky note. And then once it's there, you can move it around on the Jamboard. And then at the top, you'll see there's 6 different ones. So you'll just click the next to get to the next one. And if you want to come up with a team name, you can. All right, view only. So let me check. Just want to see more of you. I'm just opening my screen up. Give me just a moment. Okay. So let's take a look here at that first question. Which types of assessments have you created most often, informal or formal, and maybe why that format, if you had a chance to share? So it looks like I'm just going to start on the left here. So who had the orange sticky? Does anyone from that group would like to share? All right. That's okay. I don't mind. So at Appomattox, which looks like grades K through 5, they've created far more informal than formal assessments. And definitely, I think you all would probably agree that probably does occur more often in elementary levels, using more of the informal assessments. Not that we don't at middle school and high school, but I would expect that to be the case. We've got some yellow stickies. I don't know if that was all the same group. Does anyone want to share if you had one of the yellow stickies? Is there a group member that wouldn't mind sharing?
Wendy's going to speak up for our group.
Okay. Any takers? Okay. I don't mind doing that as well. I'm looking at this one in particular, almost in the middle, using Flipgrid. Love that idea. Bell ringers and exit tickets, those work. I think those work well for sure. Performance matters. Yes, my school is going to start using performance matters this coming year as well. So I'm excited to see more about that. So you all came up with some great things here. I don't know what a boom card is. Is there anyone in that group that can tell me what a boom card is?
I can tell you. So boom cards are just, it's an online resource, and they have them for a variety of different topics. But essentially, the kids log in with their own name and password, and they create, or not create, they it's an activity. So usually it's a click the right answer or click and drag the answer, but they have lots of cute graphics and cute little sounds, and it's immediate feedback. It tells them whether they got it right or didn't get it right. So I use them a lot. I teach first grade.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
They're kind of like an online task card.
Okay. Okay. I jotted that down so I can check it out later. So thank you for sharing that. Some other things I see on here, Nearpod, whiteboards, thumbs up, thumbs down, quick formative. Also, I like on this sticky, I'm not sure which group this was, but allowing students to rate their own work and peer rubrics. So have any of you gone as far as to incorporate students into the rubric development? Have you thought of taking that approach as well, as helping the students define what they should know about a topic and then using that as the rubric at the end to assess their performance on whatever the project or the assessment is?
That's something I'm planning on doing. I teach high school English, 11th grade, and that's something that I'm going to be working with since my class is so intensive in writing. I'm really gonna play around with that this year.
Oh, great. Yeah, so that's something one of my teachers, my humanities teachers does that as well. In addition to allowing students to select from 2 different types of assessment to demonstrate their knowledge as well. She has them work with her to develop the rubrics. All right, great. I'm gonna move to the second question. Do you typically use a pre-assessment? Why or why not? So again, no right or wrong answer here, just to get that discussion going. It looks like for the most part, everyone said that yes, but there has been some issues, of course, working in the virtual environment to get that done. But planning to use them again next year. Using an entry ticket as well and warm-ups. Yeah, those are great ways to do that as well. Love the brain dump. That's always a great way to get students to kind of demonstrate that they've understood what they understand about that topic. Just look at a few more here. Yeah, okay. What I'm looking at is this one pink sticky here in the middle that, so it sounds like maybe someone is working on a team that have done their assessments or their methods of teaching for some time, and they've been practicing that style and maybe not as open to doing it different ways. So I can certainly understand that, but definitely the virtual environment did have a major impact on how we engaged our students this past year, for both good and bad ways that we engaged our students. Did anyone want to specifically share their information from their group or make any comments about this topic?
I'd like to share it. I teach band, and it's very different, obviously, than what 90% of you guys are doing. But one of the coolest things we do in our room is with my jazz band, which is my advanced group, the very first piece that we play, we record. And it's pretty horrendous because they haven't learned anything yet. And then it's really cool to we learn a lot more about transitioning from concert band to jazz style and doing different things, and then learn that piece of music properly and record it again in December, which is usually when we perform it for the first time. And then we'll record it again in June, which is, the end of our season, because our music is progressive and we just kind of keep adding to our repertoire. It's really cool to go back and hear like beginning, middle, and end of the school year about how they've transitioned. And it's a real eye-opening experience for the kids to see how much they've grown in one year.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else do something similar to that? Do you keep writing portfolios for your students that you give them at the end of the year so they can see how their writing progressed?
Again, I haven't, but I'm planning on doing a portfolio at the end of this school year, so I can reflect on how the students have progressed over the course of the semester.
Great. Thank you both for sharing. I'm just keeping an eye on time, so I'm going to move to slide 3. How do or can you use formative assessments to inform your instructional practices? So I think we had, I'm not sure if every group got to this point, but let's take a look at some of these. You can use formative assessments to start your next lesson, yes, to do some review. In special education, we use it for data to measure progress, definitely. Especially I'm assuming for the marking period reports that you have to collect throughout the year. If you're using data-driven instruction, and this allows for remediation, love that. Yes. Mastery check, yeah. So I think everyone was pretty similar on this topic. Does anyone have anything that they wish to share or any comments about this question? Okay.
Oh, one of the ladies in my group, they said that they help use it to form the small groups that they work in.
Okay, that's a great
I
idea.
review.
Yeah, so and as a way to kind of help differentiate where students need the most assistance or most support. I love that idea. That's a great idea. All right, number 4.
That's,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that's actually kind of where we're going this afternoon. So
Yeah.
just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. All right, number 4, in your classroom, how do you incorporate students into the assessment process? Or if you're not doing it, how could you? And so let's take a look. Anyone want to just, before I take a look at any of these Post-its, anyone want to just go ahead and share? Any group?
Be happy to share one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the lower left yellow sticky. And I was saying, when I inherited some tests from another teacher, I noticed that on her assessments, she would have different areas where she would give students like 5 questions and tell them pick 3 of them to answer. So the students can choose which questions they feel comfortable answering, help them feel confident, but also seeing what questions they answer tells you what they didn't feel confident about. So it's helpful for the students and it's helpful for the teachers.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I actually also do that with when I'm working with my doctoral students in the research classes. I will typically, their essay questions will give them several choices and they have to respond to a certain number of them. But that's a great example. Anyone else want to share on this topic?
I have a question about using that technique. Do you give extra credit if they answer more than is expected, or do you just, just take it and not reward the extra effort?
This teacher didn't have it built in to give extra credit for extra ones answered, but in me thinking I'm going to steal that technique, I was thinking I'll give a standard amount of points for the ones that have to be answered, and then like a fraction of extra points for ones that they choose to answer. So like if each question is worth 3 points and they have to answer 3, they're supposed to get 9. But if there's 5 questions available and someone chooses to answer the extra 2, they might get 1 point each for those extra 2 instead of 3 points each.
Mm-hmm. And for me, with doctoral students, you may suspect, if you're familiar, they tend to be overachievers, so they want to answer all of the questions. And I usually tell them whichever of the first, like if I say, here's 5 questions, select 3, the first 3 I grade. And then the other ones, I just give you feedback. And I might say, if I were to grade this question, this is what you would get. So I still give them feedback, and but that's, that's working with adult learners. This summer, I'm teaching a dual enrollment class at my school. So I'm going to try it out with my 11th graders as well, and see how that goes. Yeah, great. Okay. Let's move on to question 5. Which types of assessments have you found to be most successful in your classroom? And are there any that seem to be not as successful, or you don't really like as much? Anyone willing to go ahead and share?
I can share really what I said. I was a little blunt with my group, and I basically just said, I find that the most successful assessments are the ones that you plan for, and the ones that you don't plan for are the least successful. Because if you throw something together or you do a quick assessment without really thinking about what you're asking the students, that data usually isn't as reliable as when I look back at all of my students' self-assessments and the work that they've created over the course of a unit. and tailor an assessment, that is often the best assessment for me. So.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
I want to speak to her point.
Okay.
Just coming from like I don't, again, not necessarily having a group of students to teach to, but like working with teachers and looking at their data. This year, of course with virtual learning, we had assessments built into I guess our planning, where they came from the district and they came every 4.5 weeks. And it's like, I got to the point where I told the teachers, again, being very blunt and being very having candor, I was like, why are we looking at this? Because we know, one, the students aren't like in the classroom, they're not engaged, so they're not taking this test seriously. And I was like, two, like, we're just going to like, we're doing it because we have to. So we're gonna look at it with a grain of salt. So again, like, I found that when the students are actually present and in the classroom, they do better for you than virtual learning. But we did the best with what we could this year. So yeah.
Definitely. I think someone else.
If I can add, what I found to be interesting this year is there was a group of children that could learn virtually and do very, very well virtually, however small it was. And then when I did further observation on who those students were, they were autistic, it seems, or having that social skill of being isolationists, or they prefer being by themselves. They prefer to be in that non-disruptive environment. So it'd be interesting to find a way to even compare those types of data this year.
Like those from the virtual environment to the in-person environment. Yeah,
Yes.
it'll be interesting.
Yes. I had one guy that went from straight Fs when we brought him into the school to AB honor roll. And then one that we left out, straight A's from a CD reporting last year. So it was just, that was something unique there that needs to be looked at in the educational environment.
Yeah. I'm sure the virtual learning environment of the last year is definitely going to be the subject of many research studies to come over years. I think we have one last slide to take a look at here, and that was, what else do you want to know about assessments? And so let's see, definitely new ideas. I think here's one thing that I always try to tell my graduate students when we're working on research projects, and I'm going to say this to each of you. Each of you teaches in a different environment, you teach different content areas, but just know you are an authority on teaching. Even if you're a first year, you have experiences that you may not give yourself credit for. And I'm thinking about this idea of the new ideas for assessment. Be the leader within your school that maybe sets up a Google Drive where teachers can share different ideas or creative ways to do informal assessments. Don't be afraid to work or partner up with teachers that you've met or that you work with every day. Write a book. Give out ideas about that. So don't be afraid. That's my whole thing, is don't be afraid to take that step, because you may have the feeling that you're not an expert on it, but you are, because you are in the classroom with the students. So you're doing the work. So just throwing those ideas out there. Dr. Spencer, someone asks, what do we think are the best form of assessments? Did I catch you off guard, Dr. Spencer?
No.
In your classroom, what do you tend to use more often as a form of assessment?
The best assessments that I have now, granted, I'm talking about for college students. I actually like performance-based assessments. I've actually, I'm tenured professor, so I can probably get away with a few things. But in the last couple of years, I've actually moved away from the standard multiple choice test that has 50 or 60 questions on it, because I just didn't think it gave students the opportunity to perform or actually show me what they're all about, because I'm in the job of preparing teachers. So I want you to show me through a project what you've done. So I'm into actually more performance-based assessments, making sure students are integrating technology and showing what they've done through a field-based experiment, or showing me how they're going to plan for action research. And I've actually get more engagement and actually greater quality out of those type projects than a multiple choice ABC test, and people are just guessing and kind of doing what they need to. So those are the things that have actually worked better for me in my teaching, especially over the last 2 to 3 years.
Great. And I would agree with that, as I feel like something that's more along the lines of performance-based assessment. So when students come to me at the beginning of a research class and they say, oh, we're doing a research paper, and I try to say, it's more than that. This is going to be a way that you demonstrate to me that you've understood the concepts that we've covered throughout the course of the semester. So if I was teaching a course, I've taught a course before in school counseling where students, we were preparing for a comprehensive exam, which was the national counselor exam. It was a multiple choice exam. So instead of giving multiple choice quizzes during the class, I would give a quiz, but it wasn't a quiz grade, it was an activity grade. Did you complete this activity, and did you write a small summary about what you felt about your performance, or where you needed to put more attention on understanding concepts? So I gave them a grade based on whether they completed it and their self evaluation, as opposed to giving a multiple choice quiz grade. So that's one thing I did. So great, everyone, you guys. I love the discussions that we've had. It's been great. Someone says, how do we get your book? We don't have the book, but the book that we suggest is, I'll drop see if I've got a link. I'll type it in the chat. I gotta find my chat. The authors are Gary's and Grant and Spencer. I think it's 2017, or is it 2015?
I think it's actually 2015. And the book is available on Amazon. And yeah, I know the book is available through Amazon.
Okay. It's called Teacher. I'm trying to think. Let me look back at my slides. I have it at the bottom of my slides.
And one thing about the book, I actually know that both of the authors of the book. That wasn't the only reason why I selected it, but the book was actually written more so with the teacher. Thank you. More so with the teacher in mind. That's actually who the book who was geared for. It's and one of the reasons we use it with our class, because we find it to be an easier read, a little more user-friendly read, as opposed to some of the other assessments books that we have that can be a little bit more technical, a little bit more in the weeds, if you will. So I'm not anti using those books, but this is a book that we tend to use.
Yeah. All right. So again, thank you to everyone for being here today and for your participation. I'll make sure you all get your participation points for this morning.